lesson. Okay, so today's topic for the training, we focus here on IELTS writing task 1. Task 1, okay. Particularly data essays. Yeah. So as we have discussed in our previous meeting, that so today's main topic is IELTS writing task 1, data essays. Now, as we have discussed earlier, that in IELTS writing, you will have different types of essays. So we have data, maps, and diagrams. Now, for data essays, we have learned there are two essay types. So the first one is the dynamic essays, and the second one are the static graphs, dynamic graphs and static graphs. And going back, these are the 4 criteria in which the candidate is graded. So it begins with TA, or task achievement, followed by CC, or cohesion and coherence, lexical resource or vocabulary, and GRA, or grammatical range and accuracy. So in the last meeting, we studied how to get a higher score in task achievement. And the main thing that students have to check for the advanced level students is to understand the topic, all right? Now, today's main focus is cohesion and coherence. Cohesion and coherence. So, in other words, cohesion and coherence means the logical flow of writing task 1 essay. So let me share to you the screen here about how to make the logical flow of one's essay or writing task 1 essay. So here's how we are graded in writing task 1. So we have your task achievement, which we have explored last meeting. We have your cohesion, coherence, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. Now, if you check the model answer here from the student, if you check here the CC, or cohesion and coherence, if you check here the candidates, got a score of around 5 in cohesion and coherence. Now we're going to explore the reason behind this getting a score of 5 in cohesion and coherence. Okay. Now there are three things that one must consider in improving the score in cohesion and coherence. So the first one, if you check the board there, the notes, the first one is the effective use of complex sentences. The second one is the use of cohesive devices or transition words. And the third one is we have the substitution and referencing. So this is the three key points. So these are the 3 key points in which the candidate has to check when applying or when checking the logical flow of your essay. So it begins with the effective use of complex sentences, the effective use of or accurate use of cohesive devices, substitution and referencing. So let's check this one by one. Okay, so we check here. I'm gonna show you here the screen, and let us check this one one by one. What do I mean by the accurate use of complex sentences, cohesive devices, and substitution and referencing. So if you check there, I highlighted the main reason why there is a need to use the substitution and referencing. So if you check there on the board, so I made a highlight there that the main reason we or the candidate has to use this substitution and referencing is number one, the main reason is to avoid repetition of words. This is the main reason. Now, if you check the main criteria for lexical resource, or if you check the main criteria for lexical resource or vocabulary, all right, which we'll explore later on. So the main criteria here to get a better score in lexical resource or vocab is to have a wider range of vocabulary. And the second one is the accurate use of vocabulary. So again, the main reason why the candidate has to apply or use here substitution and referencing is number one, which is the main reason, is to avoid repetition of words. And number two, the second one is to have a wider range or to apply or use wider range of vocabulary. Okay. So that's the second key point or key reason or main reason why one has to use here substitution and referencing. So let us take a look at these three key points one by one. Okay. So if you check here the Band 7 score for IELTS Writing Task 1, it says here there's a clear progression. That means there's an effective use of complex sentences, the effective use of cohesive devices, and the third one is the effective use of referencing and substitution. So if you check here the band score 5, it says here not use referencing and substitution. In here, in band 4, the candidate only uses here cohesive devices, but most of these devices are inaccurate and repetitive. Now, going up to band 6, there is an attempt of using referencing and substitution, just an attempt, but the main goal for band 7 in using this referencing and substitution is to use them with accuracy. So this is the main one. So the main focus here is the accurate use of substitution and referencing. Okay, so let us check here one by one, the use of complex sentences. So as you can see here, all right, we have two types of data essays. One is dynamic graph and the other one is a static graph. Now, if we check at the model essay here from a student, the student here collected or got a score of 5. So let's check the main reason here. So the main reason why the candidate here got a score of 5 is that the student didn't use effectively the cohesive devices of comparing things or using comparison. So if you check the model essay here, the student uses transition words that doesn't show comparison. So for example, we have the transition words here, moreover, in addition, what else? And next, lastly. So these transition words, yes, these transition words must be avoided in writing the data essay. So again, these transition words here, like moreover, in addition, next, lastly, should be avoided in data essay. Why is that? So if you check the task here, the task here in data essay is to summarize the information. This is the task here by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons relevant. So the main task here, all right, the main task here in data essay is to make comparisons relevant. So that is why there are cohesive devices. So if you check here, the main cohesive devices that must be used, or even the use of complex sentences. So these two. So the main thing, or the main words that, or the main transition words that must be used here are those that shows contrasts or comparison, right? So these are the main transition words or cohesive device that must be used in data as a task one. Why is that? Because if you check the graph, the task there is to, your only task there is to summarize the information, summarize. That means no new information is needed, all right? No new information is needed. You just need to summarize. And the second one is to make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so it's very clear. The task is very clear. Your main task is simply to summarize information. That means no new information that must be added, all right? And to make comparisons where relevant. So therefore, if the student, for example, uses transition words like moreover, all right, in addition, all right. So this is an attempt to add information, add info. That is why this shouldn't be applied or used in connecting ideas in writing task one data essays. Other things that most students use here, they also use, for example, the word meanwhile, all right? This is very common. So meanwhile here, this means at the same time, at the same time, all right? Now this will be effectively used, again, I have to take note here. So this word here, meanwhile, must be effectively used in describing stages or process. So this must be reserved in using process diagrams. Other things that most students use here, we have also, what is that? Moreover, in addition, meanwhile, firstly, secondly, thirdly, all right? So these transition words here, this means describing stages or steps, all right? So the transition word here are used to describe stages or steps. So that is why, again, this shouldn't be used, these cohesive devices shouldn't be used in connecting ideas in data essays. And the main reason there is that our task, okay? The main reason there is that our task is simply to summarize the information, the first task, and second task is to make comparisons where relevant. So again, if you take a very close look of students' essay, the candidate here uses words like moreover, in addition, next, lastly, finally. All right. So that and the candidate repeatedly use the cohesive devices that describes stages or process. So that's the main reason why he or she got a score of 5. Now, if you check the model answer here for writing task 1, you couldn't see any transition words, number 1, that adds information, for example, moreover, or in addition. Number 2, you describing stages or steps, for example, meanwhile, firstly, secondly, and thirdly, and lastly. So you couldn't find it here in the model essay. Okay, so that's the main reason why we only have to use here, we strictly have to use here cohesive devices that shows comparison and contrast only. Okay, so we have an example here for writing the overview. We have while, despite, and we also use here although and whereas. Okay. So one thing that we have to consider here is that one should never complicate the use of complex sentences. So one or two subordinating conjunctions must be used in a sentence. Okay. Now let's move on to referencing. Now the third one, if we check here, we call it referencing here. So if you check here on the board, right? So the third main criteria to achieve a logical flow of your essay is to have an effective use of substitution and referencing. And again, the main reason here is to avoid repetition of words and to apply wider range of vocabulary. So let us take a look at a very good example here good example here of substitution and referencing. So we have here, if you check, yeah, so if you check the, yeah, okay, if you check these two essay here, essay number 2 effectively use here cohesive devices. So we have here, for example, in contrast, however, whereas, so we couldn't find here any transition words that adds information and describing the stages or process or steps. All right. Okay. Now, what is referencing? So if you check the Band 7 score here for IELTS Writing Task 1 Data Essay, we can find here that the third and most important criteria here is the effective use of referencing with accuracy. So we have this one, effectively uses referencing with accuracy. And the main reason or purpose why we have to use the referencing is to avoid repetition of words. So for example, if you happen to see this in your student's essay, for example, we have the word consumption and another word here, consumption. This is repetition of exactly the same words in 2 sentences. And this could affect their score both in lexical resource and cohesion and coherence. So that is why instead of repeating the words, so we use your referencing in the second in sentence number 2. So instead of repeating the word consumption, all right, so we replace that with this figure, which means the figure here, which means the 400 grams, all right. So this figure then fell to 300 grams. And then we have more examples for referencing. The first example is the use of former and latter. That's the first example. The second example is the use of respectively. That means according to the previous order. So for example, here in 1995, the approval ratings of England and Denmark were 20% and 80% respectively. So 20% belongs to the ratings in England and 80% belongs to the ratings in Denmark. Okay, so there are only 3 key points, all right? So for referencing, there are only 3 key points. So the first one is, yeah, for referencing, yes, the first one is the use of the pronoun this. So we can say, for example, this figure, this amount, this number, this volume, all right, or this, yes, okay, this quantity, for example. And then the second one is the use of former and latter. So former and latter is it's very easy to identify. So F here stands for first mentioned, and L here stands for the last mentioned. The first mentioned and the last mentioned. That's our former and latter. And finally, the third way to use referencing is the use of the word here, respectively, or according to the order. Okay. So that's pretty clear now for CC, or cohesion and coherence for writing task 1. Okay, so now let's go to the third one, which is a lexical resource. So we check here the third one, the third criteria that we have to check on how to get a higher band for lexical resource. So let me show you the screen. Okay, so if you check here lexical resource, it says here describe and make comparisons and use wider range of vocabulary. Now we check here the student score for lexical resource. Okay, that's a score of 6 for LR. So if you check here the third one, so the candidate here got a score of 6 for lexical resource here. Yeah. And we will check here how did the student get a score of 6. Now, there are two main criteria to pay attention to to get a higher band score for lexical resource. One is the precision, and the other one is the sufficient range. So let us take a look at these two key points for to getting a better score for lexical resource. So. So there are two key important points to check for lexical resource. The first one is the wider range of vocabulary, and the second one is accuracy. So what do we mean by a wider range of vocabs? So that simply means the effective paraphrasing. This one, paraphrase. Okay. So when we paraphrase, this means that the candidate, all right, can effectively use synonyms or can change the word function. Okay. Another thing for wider range is the use of descriptive words. All right. So these descriptive words, these are the accurate use of adjective and accurate use of adverbs. And finally, the third one is the topic vocabulary. So the accurate use of topic vocabulary. So what do we mean by topic vocabulary? As we have mentioned in a previous meeting, data essays have two types of essays. One is dynamic and one is static graphs. All right. Now for topic vocabulary, for dynamic graphs, the key vocabulary here that might be used are those that describes movement. For example, those that describes the upward trend, downward, fluctuating, and didn't change. For the static graphs, so the main vocabulary here are those that shows comparison or mainly comparative adjectives. Okay. Now for the accuracy, yes, that's again for accuracy here. This is the effective use of topic vocabulary. Another thing for accuracy here is the use of transition words or cohesive devices. So as we have mentioned earlier, that in data essays, words to add information, for example, moreover, all right, or firstly, describing steps and process. So this is not an accurate use of vocabulary in connecting ideas in writing task 1. So that's another meaning that's another point to consider when we speak of accurate use of vocabulary. So we check here. Yeah, let me show you the screen here, so we can Yes, okay, here. So for sufficient range here, we use your synonyms in writing the introduction. Now, it's pretty easy to identify synonyms and changing the word function. Now, there are times that your students couldn't identify, or your students try to change every word to synonyms. All right, so these are the things that I warn them. Okay, so on the use of synonyms, because most of them think that they have to use synonyms for every word. Now, I would say that there are some words that you cannot change into synonyms, so you simply have to copy them. All right? Some words. Now, for example, some of these words are countries. All right. Some. Or maybe some names which you cannot change. For example, names of people, or maybe place. All right? So some of those names of countries and places, you could not, one couldn't change into synonyms. Okay. So that is why accuracy, yes, here, that is why accuracy is very important. Now, the words that can be easily changed to synonyms, most of them are verbs. Yes. Most of these words are verbs. Some are nouns, but most of them are verbs. For example, describing trends. For example, go up, all right, increase, decrease, and so on. So most of these are verbs. Some are nouns, but some nouns, for example, like countries, or some names of countries and names of people, one cannot just simply change them into synonyms. Okay. Yeah. So the best way to do there is just to simply copy those words, not change them into synonyms, or change the function of the word. Okay. So this is the another key point that must be considered, that must be taught to our students too.
That you study. Good.
Yeah.
First.
So yeah. So for example, here the verbs, we have here precise vocabulary for verbs. Now we have here verbs to describe the upward trend that doesn't change, and trend that goes down. All right. So here we have plenty of synonyms to be used in describing the trends, like such as upward trend, didn't change, and downward trend. Another key point there is that we also have, or cannot have to use here adjectives or adverbs. So for example, we have here fell slightly, sales fell slightly, prices dropped sharply, production rose steadily, etc. So if you check here, check here, we are now in Lexical Resource. So if you check here, there must be an effective use of adjective and adverb. All right. So for adjective, it must be adjective plus noun, and it must be verb adverb. All right. So for example, rise dramatically, fall slightly, etc. So you see that in Lexical Resource. Okay. Yeah. So this is what we mean by precision in vocabulary. Right. So again, if you check the model answer here, you see here adjective, for example, remain stable, steep fall, moderate rise, etc. So that's those are just some examples. And then we have here also adjective and noun, for example, a sharp increase or growth, nearly doubled, that's adverb. Okay, so that's what we mean by precision in the use of vocabulary. Now, for static graph, as I have mentioned earlier, that the main vocabulary here is the use of comparative adjectives. Because this graph is static, so that means it doesn't show movement. So since it doesn't show movement, the best way there is to use comparative adjectives. So the example I see here, as you can see, we have here, for example, the quickest way to travel, the greatest distance, shortest journey, etc. So that is why it's very important to understand or to differentiate the two types of data essay. So one is dynamic essay and the other one is static essay. And the main reason why we have to clearly identify them or differentiate them, it's because the type of vocabulary that we're going to use are different. Okay. Okay, now, if you check here the model answer of a student, this greatly affects the score in lexical resource. So if you pay attention very closely, all right, so in this essay, it doesn't show ranking or competition. So here the student says in the 4th place was German, okay? So this is the key point here. All right, so using words like in the 4th place, place second, and the 3rd rank, so these are not appropriate in describing data essay unless, okay, so there is a condition there, okay? So unless the graph, okay, unless the graph shows really a kind of competition, all right? So for example, a racing competition, for example, a race or Olympics, for example, all right? So the graph in this essay is not about competition, or yes, not about competition. The graph here, if you check the model answer here, the graph shows about the percentage of students studying second language, the percentage of students in New Zealand, right, studying the second language. If you check the introduction here from the student, it's very clear that he or she mentioned that this graph here shows about the primary education students studying foreign language by language. All right. So it never mentioned about anything about competition. So instead of saying, right. So instead of saying 4th place, second place, or 3rd place, the candidate can say, for example, that German is the least chosen language. All right. So instead of saying 4th place or 3rd place, all right. So he or she could change that by saying German language. German language, yes, showed very low popularity. Showed a very, for example, low popularity in terms of students' choice. Okay, in students' choice of second language, for example. So instead of saying 4th place, German language ranked the 4th place, or German language ranked the 3rd place. And again, if the candidate tried to use that phrase, then it can affect her score in task achievement. That means he or she doesn't understand what the graph is, and it also affects the lexical resource. All right, so here will be affected and this too will be affected. So if the lexical resource is 5, so probably the task achievement could also be 5. So if you check the model answer here from the student, all right, so yes, that is very clear. In fact, it's very clear here that the task achievement that he or she got here is 5. And so does the lexical resource, okay? Yeah. So that's Now in here, we check here. Now there are some ways to improve the synonyms. So we can encourage them to use fraction instead of percentage. So we can ask them to remember these, all right? So fraction in terms of percentage, and then a fraction in terms of percentage. And there's some other ways to describe percentage by not using percentage. So changing them to fraction, or we can say, for example, a small minority or largest population, etc. So those are just some examples of effectively use synonyms. Okay, so again, the two key points for improving the vocabulary. One is the precision. Yeah, one is precision, and the other one is the sufficient range. Now, since it's very clear for lexical resource, now we can move on to GRA, the last one, grammatical range and accuracy. So let me. So everyone, if you have any questions about today's topic, so please feel free to raise your hand, or please feel free to ask questions, and I'd be glad to answer them. So let's move to the fourth and last criteria in here. So the fourth and last criteria is grammatical range and accuracy. So we have here. So if you check here the model answer from a student, he got a score here of 6 for GRA, 6 for grammatical range and accuracy. And I think it's not bad. Now, there are 4 key points, all right? So if you check the board there, so in improving the grammatical range and accuracy, there are 4 key points to consider. We have here the use of complex sentences, comparisons, and referencing. Now we have learned these 2 things, the first 2 things, which are the complex sentences and making comparisons. No, first 3 things. We have their complex sentences, comparisons, and referencing. Now the third thing that we have to consider to getting a better score in grammatical range and accuracy is the use of passive voice. So again, we have discussed this earlier, the use of complex sentences. So we have discussed this earlier, the use of complex sentences showing contrast only. And comparisons, cohesive devices that shows comparisons. And we also discuss about the effective use of reference